2012 movie The Citizen. It's directed by Sam Kadi, who's also responsible for the story, and it stars Agnes Bruckner, Khaled Nabawa and Rizwan Amanje. It's inspired by true events. It's about Ibrahim Jair. He's trying to start a new life away from the Middle East, and he wins a green card lottery for the US with a chance to become a citizen, and he ends up landing in New York the day before the 9/11 attacks. And it's these attacks that forever shape the struggles he faces as he pursues the American dream. The girl in the adjoining room's got a conflict with her boyfriend. Spots Abraham in the corridor and runs into his room to escape the anger of her boyfriend, and then there's a sort of a dialogue between the two which brings out how Abraham is a guy that generally wants to help people, wants to be seen as a good guy, and they quickly develop a sort of a cultural exchange. He gives the girl some Lebanese candy, and she then offers, as he's new, to show him around a bit, and it's a pleasant introduction to each other. Her knowledge of the Middle East is not good. Her geography isn't that clever. She goes through Libya and Iran, where this guy is from, and of course he's from Lebanon. And but it's a sort of a hopeful beginning, really. The two of them share a sort of typical sort of like tourist type day in New York, with cameras being flashed and snippets of culture, and Abraham gets to sort of capture political protests, like one girl making statements on a street corner about her opposition to the president, and it's a sort of a quick sort of picture album of how a person who arrives in the US from a part of the world where things are radically different would sort of be quite surprised and taken in, and almost a learning experience about what America is all about. And they exchange, she gives him a telephone number for him to contact her another time, and it's all very sort of friendly and a learning experience and an exchange of goodwill, really. Then 9/11 takes place, 11th of September 2001, and the anti-Muslim views rear their head to the extreme. Abraham is arrested and held without charge 6 months. I'm going over this quickly. He's completely confused as to why these accusations are being made by law enforcement in interview, just because he's Muslim. Next, he faces the problem of trying to find employment. There's the stereotype now, of course. He's avoided like the plague. Eventually, coincidentally, the girl, Diane, comes across the other Arab that they met on the morning of the attack. He just happens to own a store, small store, convenience store, and he gives Abraham a job. It's a little bit cliched. We get to view the girl Diane, how she views those disadvantaged, such as Abraham, because of their because of no fault of their own, being viewed by others in a racist way, and alternatively her own kind, who she perceives are totally responsible for allowing themselves to become homeless. They're bums off the street. The perception that they should have avoided it. This, of course, is a rather skewed perception, but it's an interesting point that's drawn out in comparing Abraham, who, because of 9/11 prejudice, is having extreme problems getting jobs and that sort of scenario, vis-a-vis Americans who are on the streets because of their own behaviour, drinking, gambling, etc., etc. The movie takes a glimpse at the pressures for ethnic groups after such an incident are enormous, that they have to, for example, running a business, have to get everything 100% correct, otherwise it throws suspicion on them, and it also leads to them not actually enjoying any aspect of life because they're so sort of fixed on making sure that the authorities are happy, won't see any flaws, won't see any issues to quibble with. They become obsessive about detail and sacrifice time with family members because that could be time that they should have been using to get their books in order, etc. Adversity. We then see how decisions by others creep into one's own life. Where he works, the owner decides to close up, leaving Ibrahim without work. At the same time, in his attempts to help this homeless guy stay temporarily where he is, the girl, Diane, starts to get very itchy and basically tells him he has to leave after his friend appears to be a bit light-fingered. And then we get incidents of violence on the streets, racist attacks, and of course his attempts to help one who's being attacked leads to him getting a beating. We're reminded of Abraham's desire to get that citizenship after 5 years. However, he has to cope with further adversity. The Muslim woman that he's taken a shine to has to return to an alien parent, and almost invites him to join her, but no, he wants to stay on in the US and not give up. Also, his efforts to run to the aid of a victim of an attack on the street is rewarded when this sort of quality is seen as a potentially essential part of trustworthiness, as he then gets an opportunity to become involved in a business selling cars. This is the message, the hopefulness, the ability to see adversity as a stepping stone with which one has to show strength and step through to better things. I like this sort of movie. Then after all these efforts, Abraham is served with a deportation notice. He's almost ready to give up, and then the bridges that he's crossed, the trust that he's built with others comes to his aid, and he ends up getting an attorney pro bono to fight against his deportation. What is the ironic, and when we get to the court hearing with regard to deportation, it seems to oscillate with what's actually taking place now with regard to human rights, with regard to the detaining of Julian Assange, the idea that evidence has to be secret because to let people know what it is actually a danger to national security. This doublespeak is once again drawn out in this particular movie, bearing in mind that this movie was made not as little as 8 years ago. It just goes to show how quickly political perspective on what is right and wrong, what is in one's interest, in the public's interest, in the national interest of the country, and the right to a human right to speak, all that's now thrown up in the air. But this movie acts as a sort of a notch on history, when freedom, human rights were the top of one's agenda in the so-called free world. Ironic that this should also be a movie that talks about the impact of 9/11, when we are now becoming more and more aware that 9/11 was an inside job, that the American government deliberately created this hateful crime to justify their military-industrial complex intrusions to countries around the world. And after that heavy explanation of where the film is at, I'll say little else than to tell you that there's a happy ending.